Hi and welcome to another video from GMRUNSGAME. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the Hags Hut. This is the second adventure from Emerald Mage Games, published on DriveThruRPG and on their Patreon, of which there'll be links in the description. This is a much beefier adventure than their first one, the Lindworm Cavern, which I've previously reviewed and works as a lovely introduction into the Dragonbane universe. In this adventure your party will face much tougher combat. They'll face puzzles that require creative thinking, maybe a little bit more experience, which if they don't have, they can always solve with sticking a sword through a door or something like that. They'll face, you'll get the opportunity rather to link a couple of adventures from the Dragonbane Secret of the Dragon Emperor campaign in with this third party supported material. They'll see an extra 5 or 6 brand new creatures and enemies created for them to test their might against. So let's have a look at what they get for their money. This is one of the maps that you'll get. There are 3 maps in total. You'll get lots of different copies, grid maps, no grid maps, Dungeon Master versions of the maps that give you location numbers to refer back to, and player maps which don't give you those numbers so they can see if you want to print them off or hand them out. This is the outskirts of the Hags Hut or homestead, which your players are going to go to and explore during the process. There's a second version of this map which removes the thatched roofs and allows you then to explore the rooms, which are all fully drawn out with the grid maps if you want, or without the grid maps. There's some combat on the outside of this hut, there's some combat on the inside of this hut, and there's a couple of ways to progress the party from outside or inside of this hut into the Hag's dungeon, if you like, which turns into a bit more of a dungeon crawler scenario. It's not a huge dungeon crawler scenario though, and it's varied enough that it will keep everyone's interest. This scenario, when I ran it the first time I ran it online, we completed it in about 4.5 hours, and there's a couple of bits that I sort of moved the players through a little bit quicker, or removed some combat out of to make sure that in the one shot we were able to get it all wrapped up. But in our campaign, when we were playing through it, we took 2 sessions to make sure that we covered most of the content that was there. In fact, we covered basically all of the content that was there, as well as giving people the opportunity to intro the scenario before traveling there, and at the end of it, outro the scenario before wrapping it up with villagers who are around. This is the second map, and it's wonderfully detailed. You can see immediately your eye will be drawn to a pentagon. Not a pentagon. What are they called? It's probably good. It's probably a good thing I can't remember what those are called. With lots of candles around them, as well as at the north, there's that really vibrant sort of ethereal glow coming from some algae and some plant life. There's a cellar placed in the middle that's got a secret door. That's one of the ways the players can get into this dungeon, as well as a pool of water, which if they choose to, they can go climb down a well into and access the adventure that way as well. Okay, so in terms of plot and in terms of foes, monsters, NPCs, there's a good amount to cover, which is great. So the players will find out that there's a hag who's been abducting children, or there have been some missing children going missing from the haunted marshes. I positioned it fairly close to the Road's End Inn to allow those 2 adventures to be joined and sort of have a thread going through a couple of these adventures for our campaign. The challenge you see at the top left is Rena. That's the character that the players are charged to go in and recover. She's essentially been kidnapped by this hag along with other children in order to do horrible hag things too. She still lives, and she's petrified by the time the players get to her, unsure whether this hag has been killed or whether the hag is still alive, and the players need to try and win her over in order to try and get her out of this dungeon alive in one piece. Below her is an example of some of the cool stuff you're going to see. So there are some classic sort of Dungeons and Dragons inspired baddies in here. Not that many, maybe 1 or 2. There's some really creative stuff. This is sort of Adam's family. This is, you know, a crawling hand that the players will get surprised by. There's lots of really fun and original horror challenges and bad guys in there that the players will in no way anticipate meeting. And some of the attacks, some of the random roll tables that are available to you if you want to roll it, or if you want to pick from it thematically to build a crescendo in the combat, are really sort of call out some key memories. If your players are either horror fans or if they're not, they'll really stick out as being some moving sort of horrible moments, but great moments as well. There's nothing worse than having a sort of scary scenario set up and everything in there is kind of by the numbers, and this scenario is not by the numbers. There are some moments in here that will take the players back and they'll have to stop and think about it, and there are some moments in here that will make the eyebrows of your players get raised and say, right, we're either not having that, or how are we going to take care of this? And it's wicked. And then on the right hand side you've got the image of the hag herself. So this hag is an older woman and she transforms, and there's a really lovely, well written paragraph of her transformation. It describes in great detail how an elderly woman goes from being frail and how she would describe herself as an alchemist to this beast with horns, goat-like horns coming out of her forehead, and the clothing just barely clinging to her, and long, elongated, bony arms and limbs, and a wickedness in her eyes. And it's really well written, and she's a real tough fight at the end of this as well. Again, to reference the 2 times I've run it, when I ran it as a one-shot, the last combat happened to be with the hag, and we had players falling down and being broken, and in the end I think one player died. One player was broken, and one player killed the hag and then managed to revive and resuscitate and heal the other player. When I ran it as a campaign, we had a similar thing, although it wasn't in this combat, where a player, unfortunately, solely our Wolfkin Necromancer, he is now beyond the veil somewhere, keeping an eye on the party. We lost him, and the other players that were there really got their asses kicked, but managed to sort of pull it together a bit in the end and sort of see it over the line before reuniting Rena with the way I'd set it up was her family in the Road's End Inn. There's, like I said, more examples of these creatures that are brand new to Dragonbane, or certainly not in any of the published materials so far, and they're interesting enough for both GMs and players to find them compelling. Anything you don't use, you can reuse in other adventures, but the real big ticket stuff you're going to want to use because it really makes this one compelling. Okay, so how to link this with another adventure. So very briefly, the Road's End Inn, if you've got the campaign, you'll know, also references abducted or missing children, and there's a falsely imprisoned soothsayer in the basement of this inn who has cursed the place. The way I set it up was they ended up killing the soothsayer and leaving the dungeon, going into the cemetery where you should then find the people, and it resolves the story. Well, in this case, there was only one of the people there. The other person wasn't there in the grave, and we had the combat with the soothsayers, with the witch hounds. At the end of the combat, the players left the graveyard and went to turn right to go to the Road's End Inn. But on the tree line, there was a sort of wisp of ginger hair and a blue-skinned woman who sung to a couple of them and hypnotized them, and they went and they followed. And it was too late before the other characters realized what was happening. They turned around and they only saw the corners of their shoulders and the backs of their heads as they disappeared deep into some of the wooded area around these haunted marshes. We were lucky enough to have a Wolfkin who wasn't hypnotized and was able to use his hunting instincts then to try and track down the Hags Hut without sort of having to do too much of a journey mechanic. They discovered after the Road's End curse had been broken that the children were still missing. They got a little bit more information about this hag, and they went straight looking for the hag, the children, and their party members, who at the start of the scenario we had then split, some as hostages and some assaulting this hut, which was really, really compelling. Then towards the end of this scenario, we find out from Rena, who'd been abducted, that her family is still at the Road's End Inn. She gave a little bit more information about the hag's plans. I'd actually inserted a vampire in there as well as a hag love interest, which gave a little bit of motivation for some of the sacrifices the hag was making. And yeah, man, it just works really, really well. These two stories are in the same general location of the map. They follow, the premise is similar. This doesn't, in no way are they similar other than abducted children, right? But the premise is similar, so it's really nice to be able to say, okay, so when the soothsayer dies and this hag sees these adventures come out from this basement of this inn, the hag is then aware that, you know, the gig's up. Her illusion that she'd worked so tirelessly to leave her in peace to be able to carry on abducting and doing her nasty hag-like things has been shattered. She wants revenge on some of these adventures that she's taken, and the adventurers want to basically smash her face off, and they'll get an opportunity as long as they all survive that long. So that's how I would recommend doing it if you are running it as a campaign. If you're running it as a one-shot, then I would have them just arrive on a boat. I think it describes it at the start of this. In fact, I'm sure it describes it at the start of this scenario. The Kumar River runs along the marshes, so I'd have them travelling along with the boat, along that river, and make a stop at this hut necessary because the boat's in disrepair or something, and the adventurers are sent in exchange for a cut of the cargo when they arrive at outskirts or wherever this boat is going to be going. Okay, so let's talk and touch on balance. So as I've just described it, there are two really different ways of running this scenario. If you're running it as a one-shot, there's lots and lots of goodies in there, and there's lots and lots of treasure, which is wicked, because we're then able as GMs to decide what we want to include and what we don't want to include, or what works with our setting or our scenario or our one-shot and what doesn't. And that's really, really good. And I'm really grateful that Emerald Mage Games, have put so much content into this story. If you're running it as a one shot, that stuff is important because there's armor, there's some magic, there's some weaponry, there's some treasure which ultimately will be meaningless for your characters because they'll never get the chance to sell it. But it feels epic and grand, and there's all kinds of different toys they can play with to work their way through this adventure. If you're running it as a campaign, you need to give it a little bit more thought in terms of preparation. I'd go through it with a highlighter pen or a couple of highlighter pens. I'd highlight in one colour immediately what I'm totally happy for these players to get their hands on. So this is stuff that's either going to help them, or it's going to add value to their coin purse, or make sense for the adventure in terms of maybe they got sent here to get something as well. Maybe I think I tied the telescope, which is in this adventure, to Dranath in the Mystic's Hut. And I sort of hinted when they were in Outskirt that there was a rivalry, because Dranath is a healer. He specialises in animalism. And Hag I'd set up as a necromancer who specialised in death and raising dead. So those two NPCs were very much opposed, and one of my player characters wanted to learn some magic from Dranath, and he said, right, well listen, one way we can do this is you can take care of this sort of evil entity that's in the Vale that darkens the eastern skyline with their death magic. If you're doing it as a campaign, highlight the stuff you're super happy with, and highlight probably in a different colour stuff that would make sense, or that you're flexible and you want to be able to make a call on, stuff that the players can have. Maybe you need to revisit the value that they've been given, or when they take it to a shop, they just can't get the value that's the book value for all these items, because we don't need a golden wheelbarrow in a place where there's an abundance of cheaper wheelbarrows. Therefore, you get a quarter of the price. So you'll need to adjust a couple of things economy-wise, depending on where your characters are throughout the campaign. And there's also lots of sort of items that work specifically against certain bad guys in here. or spells or books that give advantages to stuff, I'd have a look at that and I'd make sure you're happy with what it's giving advantages for. I was. It helped the characters identify both the fake boss, the real boss, weaknesses. I've got a scholar in my party, so he was able to figure out some of the stuff that was going on and able to aid the more combat focused people to help them deal with the problems. But in terms of overall balance for the adventure or overall balance for your campaign, you're going to need to put in a little bit more preparation with the Hags Hut than you have in your published Free League Dragonbane adventures, because it's not a published Free League Dragonbane adventure, and I won't criticise it for having too much stuff in there, because ultimately I'd rather it was there and I can just decide what I want and what I don't want, rather than it being lacking and me going, okay, and probably there should be like a spell or something so that the magic user here can do something fun, or there should be. So yeah, read through what's available and make sure you're happy with what's available, and I would just sort of highlight in order to match it to your particular game. And on that, we'll talk very quickly about Emerald Mage Games. So Emerald Mage Games have now 3 adventures published on DriveThruRPG for Dragonbane, as well as a cleric class. They are 2 of the 3 adventures have got bestsellers stamps on them, which tells you that the community is enjoying them, tells you that the people are coming back to the same people who are writing these adventures, and there's good reason for that. Each of these adventures is compelling. The Limborn Cavern I loved in comparison to the Secret of the Dragon Emperor combat tutorial, and I would start my campaign in the Limborn Cavern every single time. It's just more badass, and it covers some of the same stuff. The Hags Hut is a great scenario to run when your players are more comfortable with this system. Otherwise, they might miss a couple of tricks. You know, it's. I'm not going to lie to you. It's pretty tough, but they've always got through it. My groups. So you want them to be well equipped in terms of their understanding of the system, and that's why I'd keep it. We ran it when we were, I think, 8 weeks through sort of a 12-week campaign, and it fitted quite nicely in that slot. The cleric is a really nicely made class if you've got people who are particularly interested in healing or divination. It works nicely, or works as a nice opposite of a necromancer class, which is also available on there. And then recently, a couple of weeks ago, the Ancient Tree's been published, which is set in the Iron Forest where my characters are now headed. So I fully anticipate that to sell well also. Excuse me. That one I'm currently reading through. Hopefully I'll get a good opportunity to read it and stick it into the campaign that I'm currently running. If not, I'll be running it as one shot, probably on Roll20 or maybe on Foundry. But all of these adventures are available, and if you're interested in playing any of them, let me know, drop me a comment, as well as these other adventures, which we've got content coming up for in the near future. So Treasure from the Deep, we've had one of our community reach out and say they're going to run that and they'd love a video on that, so we'll get a video done on that once I've given it a run. I think in the next week or two I'm going to run it, so hopefully look out for that sometime in September. The Alchemist's Fire is like a beefier adventure. I think it's about 30 something pages, all artwork from scratch, beautiful maps, beautiful character drawings. It's something that I'm just sort of flicking through at the moment, but getting a little bit excited about getting that on the tabletop or on the virtual tabletop. So we'll have some stuff coming up from that as well, although that might be sort of maybe 5 or 6 weeks away. And then again in a week or two, I think I've got a session of the Karkin's Revenge coming up, which is a little bit more of a political intrigue scenario. It looks like you can roleplay your way through it a bit more, or you can roleplay it through. It's more focused on roleplay than combat, but it also looks like if you make the wrong roleplay choices, there's definitely some combat. So yeah, that'll be good. We also have more videos coming up on aliens, which you can probably tell from the channel content. These are the two systems at the moment that I'm trying to support with the stuff we make, particularly with Dragonbane's third-party material being so compelling and produced to such a high standard. It's stuff I want to cover because it's so easy just to scroll through, drive through, and have no context about what you want to buy or whether what you want to buy is any good. And I think that brings everything nicely to an end for the Hags Hut video. If you did like the video, please like the video. I really appreciate it. It helps me a lot. It helps new people who play Dragonbane or who are thinking about Dragonbane finding the channel to find all the different videos we've got on there. It helps as well as the algorithm, as well as commenting. It's nice to hear if there's adventures you'd like me to cover, or if you've got any feedback, let me know. I'm always trying to improve. It's only a small channel, but it's here, I'd like to think, for the right reasons, which is just to showcase the stuff we do as this community, as well as if you want to organise some games that we can all play together. And I will see you on the next video.